One.
Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Welcome to another podcast of The Gray Stage, podcast regarding the book The Gray Stage, written by Greg Fernandez Jr. It's available on PDF and also on soft cover. Joining us today is Sophia and Greg and myself. We'll be discussing chapter 16 in the book, chapter 16. And really, this is episode, Greg, it's episode number 38 for The Gray Stage, part number 7. It's on one. We'll be starting today on page 161 in the soft cover book, which is part of chapter 16 in the book. Very good, highly recommended book. Not because we're pushing book sales to Greg to become wealthy. He's offering the book for free on PDF. This is a book that's intended to garner attention and for people to read as a research tool. No one's making money off the sales of this book. So we're not pitching it, but it's very good. It's the only book out there on the case and the best one available. Once again, we'll be covering chapter 16. It's a long chapter. We'll be going through, I'll be reading it, narrating it essentially paragraph by paragraph, and then we'll have commentary from Sophia, Greg, and myself in between. Any questions, guys?
Sounds like a plan. And you said what page in the physical book?
161 I'll be reading from. 161.
Excellent. Try to have that.
And once again, if anything comes up on these books, feel free to leave a comment, ask a question. We do follow it after these podcasts are published, and sometimes things come up that we may have missed or may have overlooked. All right, so beginning really on this third paragraph down, page 161, it begins in Greg's book. On September 26, 2014, Danny Mason sent David a one-page response about signing the, quote, certificate of employment and release. Quote, before I can sign any sort of release concerning Gray State LLC, Danny Mason wrote to David, I request in exchange that you sign documentation allowing me complete access and control to Gray State, The Rise LLC. You have stated many times before, this project is of no interest to you. I would like to continue work on this project with Robert Hoyt and produce a finished project for our fans. I request that you sign over ownership of the LLC and sign a similar waiver and release of claims that you are now requesting of me. End quote. There's a lot there. I think we go through one more paragraph here, guys. It goes on continuing. Danny Mason made it clear he was hesitant to sign the release for a handful of reasons. Quote, most importantly, he wrote Mason, because I have dedicated 4 years to Gray State. I have been intimately involved in the creating, casting, development, production, and marketing of the project to this point. I've invested my time and energy, often at the expense of my job and financial security, with the understanding that eventually I would receive compensation. Though I have received nominal compensation, Danny Mason continued, I believe that I am rightfully entitled to 10% of the gross revenue of whatever may be generated from Gray State moving forward. I would request that documentation be executed prior to me releasing any other claims or rights I have. I hope you will understand and appreciate where I am coming from, and we can get this resolved quickly, end quote. Well, where do you want to start here, folks?
Didn't Mason Hendricks say that Robert Hoyt was Danny Mason?
Oh, good question. I don't know. Greg?
I don't remember that. I do remember we were able to find who Robert Hoyt is. I believe there is some. It may have even been posted in the group too about who he is, and I believe his name is listed. It may be on the Gray State press kit too, but Robert Hoyt's name, I believe, has come up a couple of times. So that's all that I know about him.
And before we get to that, for the listeners just joining in here, there was this contractual obligation or this attorney legalese that Mitch Heil had to sign over, which he did. And the other person was Danny August Mason, which received this legalese documentation signing over the rights. In fact, you could look at it almost as a contract. David sent requested a form to Danny August Mason, almost as a contract, offering him to sign it. Now, in business law or legal or attorney speak, there's really three things that can happen with that. David Crowley sent this on behalf of his attorney, or send it to Danny August Mason. Someone receiving something like this has three options. You can choose to sign it or agree to it. You can choose to not sign it or disagree with it, or you have the option to counter offer, make a counter offer in return, which is neither saying yes or saying no, but it's countering with a new contract. Now, that's what Danny August Mason is doing here. He's countering. So before you can counter, and what he did here in writing, he didn't do this by himself. This has attorney written all over it. Someone helped him craft this letter that wrote back. So he did put a lot of time into it. He did put some thought into it. He talked with as attorneys. He got this contract in August to sign, sometime in August. I'm not sure if it was the beginning or the end, but he got it in August. Nothing happened. And finally in September, we get this response from Danny Mason that could have easily been sent from his attorney, and Danny Mason could have been CC'd or copied on it. But he just did a reply on the email and says, here's my answer. The words he used, the word execute, getting to this as quick as possible. In the time I've spent doing this, the evidence that he says that, David, you yourself had said you have little interest in this project. So he's throwing out facts to support his piece. He's just not saying, hey, how about you sign this and we call it good. We put a lot of time into this. He spent 4 years. So this is 2014, which means 2010, Danny August Mason has begun putting time and energy, essentially blood, sweat, and tears into this project. Now it's 4 years later, and you're getting something sent from your boss or your coworker, your partner, essentially saying, I want you to, sign off that you have nothing to do with this. So of course he's not going to like that or appreciate that.
Yeah.
So he says, how about, you give me the rights to the other thing. The other project, for the newer listeners, is a documentary, not called The Gray State, but it was called Gray State: The Rise. Gray State: The Rise is a documentary, 90 minutes or something to that effect. It's very good documentary, of course, talking about things that are going on in real life. Not a fictional film, but a documentary. And so he's basically saying, we'll swap it over. I'm not leaving here with nothing, is what Danny August Mason was saying. You're not going to cut me out. Give me something in return, and I'll think about doing this. And so that's fair enough. Everything he's saying here, I think, is fair. Danny August.
But how much work, how much effort did Danny August Mason put into The Rise? When you look at it, that all looks like a David Crowley project. So why?
That's a good point. Sean Wright really babysat The Rise. David Crowley did most of the work. So to your point, I don't know what on this documentary. The documentary is basically getting interviews of people, setting up the sound, the light, the studios, getting it on recording, and then putting all these pieces together into documentation format for a documentary. So Danny August Mason doesn't have skills and background in any one of those things. His is acting. His is coming up with the scripts and doing take 1, take 2, take 3. So I don't know if he has anything like that. So to clarify, my point is what he's offering is fair as far as from a legal standpoint. You can make that offer, but what you're saying, Greg, is that it's not accurate. He didn't do all those things. He doesn't get those things. I also agree with that. That's not a fair play to say. It's not even. So David Crowley's job then is to get the answer, and then to either counter that, or he himself now has the option to say, yes, I'll agree to those terms. No, I will not agree to those terms, or I'll come back with a counter to counteroffer your original offer. Now, anything that he does, any action that he takes, makes the very original offer void and null. If he says, yes, I'll agree to your counteroffer, or no, I'll agree to your counteroffer, or yes, I'll make another brand new counteroffer, it eliminates the first one. He never responds. He never answers. So this counter offer is off the table. It's dealt with. So we only have the original one sitting out there that Danny August Mason never gave an answer to. He just gave this counter. And so that's what's out there. David Crowley and Danny August Mason did everything on the movie, the film. They did all the work. Now, there's only one thing here before we get to the next paragraph, or Sophia has a point. When I mean they did everything, was they were the major points of casting, doing the script, doing the takes, getting the lighting, the audio, all these pieces done. Danny August Mason says that clearly. Here's all the things that I've done. This, the marketing, the business, all the things. The very things he told the detectives that he had nothing to do with the project. So this right here could be a quote. This evidence could go back to Apple Valley detectives and to say, when you asked him straightforward, what role did you have in the movie, not the documentary, not The Rise, just the film. He said, I'm nothing more than an actor. Nothing more than an actor is his exact words, on his words, not ours, that he told detectives. Now he's saying that I did creating, I did the casting, development, production, marketing. I did all these things. He's a business. He has a stake. He's talking a 10% stake for what he's doing. 10%, I guess, is for what all the stuff that he's did is probably fair for what he did, which means he lied to detectives as far as what your role is. So that's why this very first paragraph of this episode today is huge, because it tells so much. Danny August Mason says in October, I believe, and November, and even early December, he says, I can't answer you, David, on your request because I need to talk with my attorney first. Remember when he said that?
Yeah.
He goes, I can't answer. I got to run it past my attorney. Well, September 30th, he obviously ran it by his attorney because we've already got the answers of what the attorney said. So he was in communication with his attorney from the beginning. So Danny August Mason keeps burying himself every step of the way with lies, half-truths, and things that are not legit. Sophia, did you have a question?
No, I just have a point.
Okay, go ahead.
Mason Hendricks texts Greg on March 8th, but I'm not sure of the year. Danny Mason, or Robert Hoyt, that's right. He spells his name that way. You're not annoying. If you really want to F with Danny, just ask him how much of the Gray State that he owned. If I remember correctly, David gifted him 10%. The amount of dirt on Danny that Sean and I have is comical. He considers himself a master. JKD, that Bruce Lee shit that has never been in a fight. He thinks he is a militia man and that he could be in the military, but fell and bumped his knee once and complained the whole time that and wouldn't film. He's a phony.
So what Sophia said there is the Robert Hoyt side, which is the documentary Gray State, The Rise, that he wants to take over and get. Basically, he's just offering a swap. I'll do this and go with it. You do that and go with it. And so he wants to get it done for the fans. He's simply requesting that you sign over ownership of the LLC and a similar waiver. He's signing over the business now in this case. The LLC, which is a limited partnership, limited liability corporation. Sign it all over to me. Well, that's pretty huge request. Give me the business. Now, I know that after not wanting to release it, Sean Wright did end up releasing it officially after he had time to edit it and clean it up and make it his own. He released it and was hoping to charge and make money to do it because he got nothing out of that either. That was released on the soon afterwards by the individual who went rogue and released it. Greg, remember that?
Yes.
The individual's name, but that was all relating to Gray State, The Rise, and that's that documentary. But
yeah, and that was not Danny August Mason, but Mason Hendricks and Sean Wright were actually both part of that post-death project.
Yeah, and during before the death, these guys, meaning the project guys, were thinking they were going to make money off the project, the movie project or the web series, the documentary project, and they all were going to have a windfall of cash.
Right.
Now they get the movie going down the line saying, please sign off because I'm going to take this and run with it myself. And so you can see Mason is jockeying for position. Danny August Mason, he's jockeying here.
Yeah, and the other thing about that date is it's a very important date. September 26, 2014 is the same day, I believe. It could have been September 30th.
Oh, 26th, sorry.
Was it? Yeah, no, but I'm trying to think of the day that David Crowley went and spent a couple hours on Facebook answering questions.
We're getting to that. It's coming up.
So that must be later.
That is on the 30th.
Okay,
which
I thought
ties
it was
back to this whole thing on the 26th is a very good point, because Danny August Mason, now per his attorney, or by him personally is how he's kind of purporting it to be, is here's what I want. I'm doing this in return. I'm a big player here. I got my chips in the game. I'm a big stake player. Here's what I want. Here's are my demands.
Yeah.
And it kind of backfires, because David Crowley says, hey, wait a minute. I'm the one calling the shots here, not you guys, not any of you guys.
And just one more thing about what Sophia read there is because this was some of the first time that I really understood that there are factions, there are Gray State teams, there are factions within this thing. These guys aren't even supposed to be part of the Gray State team at this
Before
point.
Or after the deaths?
It's really hard. Definitely after, because
sure.
Yeah, definitely after. But I don't know how far back this whole teams went, where you have Sean Wright and Mason Hendricks on one side, you have Danny August Mason and Robert Hoyt, and I think a couple other people too. And you see that there are these sides forming here, and this probably started right around this time, if not May of 2014, when David Crowley finally got a real deal. I think this really may have pushed some of those people to start forming teams, to start thinking about, okay, well, if David does go forward, there may not be enough room for everybody. Let's kind of push some of these people out. Let's stir up trouble. So when Mason Hendricks says that he had dirt on Danny August Mason, I mean, that's a big deal, because he should not be telling me those things. First of all, why is he even telling me that? He's telling me that because Danny August Mason is trying to go forward with David's project, and he's not going to include Sean Wright. He's not going to include any of those other Gray State goons. So it just makes me wonder how far back these sides were actually forming. But as we get here to September 2026, now it's legal. Now we're talking about legal things, and it just seems like it's between Danny August Mason and David Crowley. I really don't. I know Danny August Mason was stalling, but I kind of think David Crowley was also stalling too. David Crowley wanted Danny August Mason to sign those papers. I don't believe David Crowley, and I could be wrong, I'm just guessing, I don't believe David Crowley had any intention of ever giving Danny August Mason any rights to the Rise. Even if he did, it's still David Crowley's project. He would still get credit. Everybody would still credit him. Even if Danny August Mason rewrote the whole thing, re-edited the whole thing, took all of those clips out, everything that David Crowley did, even if he took all of that stuff out, people are still going to think this is David Crowley's project. Danny August Mason is pretty much screwed here. And once he's out of that script, it's pretty much over. So maybe you're right. Maybe he's like, I need something. I got to have something for all of my hard work since 2010, right up until 2014. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Also on September 21st in the Day One Journal, Danny is still stonewalling me on the release document. I don't care. If he wants to burn up his energy, fine. I'm getting my legal ship in order. The expensive ordeal. The BX is almost gone. Mitch and I are amicable, and he signed his release, which is a big thing all along. And then September 23rd, he just says that he's in a holding pattern, maintaining a keep the lights on schedule work routine. Not much energy for anything else. So, then he's talking about anxiety on the 26th. He's waiting for the mics because he had sent off that new script.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what else. in regards to Danny.
And
So,
while you look for that, take your time, Sophia. Just for the newer listeners and for those who are newer following the cases, the contract that David Crowley got or was working on with the Mikes, never did it say anywhere that he had to take this legal course of action. He already had the green light. They were moving forward, whether he had this piece of paper signed or not. It's when David Crowley talked to his attorney to say, how should I navigate these waters? What should I do here? What do you think I should do? Because if I got some people in my business and this thing's going to take off, his attorney advised him to get the co-partners, the people in business that had a legal right to any of this. If it takes off and if it took off and things went good, he says, you can't come back later as well. I'm assuming you can't come back later and fix and address these things. They have to be addressed now. So he's the one who said, first point of order, get those two, the letters, and don't come back to me or the Mikes until you have them both signed. That's why David was in this holding pattern. He got the green light to move forward. He didn't have to. He could have moved forward with the Mikes and said, let's start the process. Let's sign and get this thing going. And his attorney just says, you're gonna be in problems with some sticky players down the road if this doesn't get done. So I think that's when he said, stop everything. Get this done and do nothing until this is resolved. Get this resolved. Get an answer from Danny August Mason before you do anything. Mitch Heil was an easy thing. You got it signed, returned, and it was a done deal. So as we hear of everyone saying the contract fell through, the contract was stalled, the contract was tabled, it's none of those things. But David, from a legal perspective, watching his own back, and what I call it is David being the upright, stand-up person that he was, always wanted to do things right. He wanted to dot the I's and cross the T's. Once again, I never met him. I'm not standing up for the guy and what a great person he was. What I'm saying is we have a history of David Crowley doing what was right, following the steps, following the advice he asks for people in these career positions. And he took it. So I don't know if a lot of people out there, if any of the three of us were, given this contract for $30 million to move forward, would you go back and waste the time on dotting the I's and crossing the T's? Maybe. But if you wouldn't have heard back for 2 or 3 months, you probably would have said, look, I'm gonna move forward. I can't wait. I'm chomping at the bit to do this. David held his composure this whole time and says, no, I'm not doing anything until you sign it. And so it came down. Nothing happened in October, nothing in October, November, December. He gave him the December 9th. I think it was the 9th or the 6th or the 16th as a deadline. He gave him a deadline. He says, Danny August Mason, what's your answer? Yes or no? What is it? I got to know. I can't keep playing around. So that was it. And that's when we see that Danny August Mason in a corner. He was a caged animal. He had no way out. He had nothing else he could do. So I think that's the thrust of this whole point is David Crowley took the advice was by his attorney, rightly so, and said, I'm not doing anything until everything else can wait. He says, I need this answer and I need it in a legal form and I need him to sign off that he's not doing it so he can move forward. Now his attorney ultimately was right here because this would have been a big hummer of a problem and escalating because they all would have been suing each other if the project went and moved forward.
It's true.
Anything else, Sophia, on that?
No.
How about
Just,
the point that he said he did all these long list of things on the project, and then the detectives ask, "What did you do?" "Oh, I'm just an actor. Nothing more. I'm an actor." Goes out of his way to say nothing more than an actor in this film. So right there, he's lying to detectives. Anytime there's lying with detectives, are red flags that go up. Apple Valley Police know this. They didn't take the time to do the research. They would have found out all this information.
Just a patsy. He's just a patsy, guys.
Anything else, guys?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, Comel's. Now it gets interesting here because it says Comel's sister Sidra advised me, Detective Gummert reported. This is the lead detective for Apple Valley, Detective Gummert, that over the course of the summer, she learned that David did not get a contract or the contract was canceled. She was uncertain of those details, that advised me that whatever occurred in California had fallen through and that David no longer had any agreement with the production company, end quote. Huge. Well, not huge, but this is what I call detectives speak is called hearsay. This is all just hearsay. No facts here, whatever. Everything Sidra said here, it turned out to be false. He did have a contract and nothing was canceled. So here's now Detective Gummert believing no follow-up is being done as far as we know here, as far as checking to do follow-ups like detectives do to say, hey, is this stuff correct that she's saying? Well, what he does is take her word and say the deal was canceled. All of them wrong. Now, however, according to what president of Michael Entertainment Group, Mike Boggio, explained to Dan Hennon and to what David posted on social media in September of 2014, Gray State was going to be pitched as a television series. Now, here's your point, Greg, coming up. On September 30th, very important, David Crowley spent some time on Facebook answering questions from his supporters. Quote, it seems like there's a lot of questions and expectations about this project. For the next 20 minutes or so, I will answer your questions directly, exclamation point, end quote. Once again, him being open and honest with the fans, setting aside 20 minutes saying, hey, I'm here. I'll answer them directly. Now, there are two very important posts from David Crowley that were either deleted or have been hidden from public view. One post was made on December 9th, 2014, and the other was dated September 30th, 2014. Now, this is the day that Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, there is a post in the journal that was also deleted on September 30th. I know this because it has September 30th, 2014 at 11:24, and then the Ramsdale Drive address and the temperature, and then it's blank. And when you do a day one journal entry, you could go in and you could delete the entry, but it still leaves up the date and everything.
It keeps the log of it tracks the log of some activity was done, whether or not something was deleted. So it still shows there was activity. There was at one point something there. September 30th, big day here, big day.
I just stop for one second just to go back to the Sidra, because what Sidra was telling Detective Gummert about the project being canceled, or it had, it didn't really work out, which is the same thing that David's dad will end up telling them, if it's David's dad that wrote that in the family timeline, right? David's dad had pretty much said, yeah, David called me and told me that the project, or that David walked from the project, I believe was the actual quote there. But I do wonder who told Sidra that. I don't believe that she's just basically making it up. I think somebody told her that. And who is she talking to during that time period that would have told her that? I've always been curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as far as the Gray State Project guys, I don't believe she ever met any of those guys, or even was possibly even in communication with any of the Gray State guys until after the deaths. That was my understanding personally, that she didn't know even who these guys were until afterwards, and she flew up and met with them, and they all became best friends, and all this great stuff happened. But at this point, where we're at here in the book, I don't believe she's even in communication with any of those guys. But that's a fair point question, Greg. Where did it come from then? Where did she get that information from? Or where did she assume? Where did she get, how did she come to that decision? It was wrong. She didn't know it was wrong. I think she honestly said that's what she thought at the time is what someone told her. The question is, who's that someone?
Yeah, I've always wondered that. Who is that? Because by that time, I think Detective Gummert talked to her pretty quickly after these deaths, so there wasn't that much time. And how did that even get brought up?
I think the father was going through the hospice care with Nalia, and so Gummert was spending his time with Sidra. The information was going just really that direction, was it not? So all she had, and she was living in Texas, for those new to the case, not much. They were best friends. Her and Sidra and Kamel were best friends, very close. But I don't know how much Sidra knew of the Gray State Project at all, other than what David said and what Kamel, relayed to her. I don't know how close that was, but somehow it came about that it was canceled or shut down. That's not the case, but how did she get there? How did she get to that point to say that? So, very good. It's a good point. Why did she even get to that, concept? And maybe, Kamel was pulling back at the same time. Interesting. They had not stopped paying their car rental on the car that Mr. Alam gave them. And so maybe Kamel was starting to be coy as well with her best friend's sister. But somehow they got on the wrong track. Now, so that's the Sidra part. Now we get into the going down middle of page 162. Two very important posts. The missing post from September 30th included a question by a supporter as well as an answer by David Crowley, posting as Gray State. So keep in mind, too, that there were several Facebook pages and groups. David Crowley had his own personal Facebook page. There's also a Facebook group that he was the admin of and would make posts. And when he would make a post and hit submit, the public would see, the Gray State was posting it. But we know that this was him. Posting as Gray State, in the post, David Crowley mentioned his plans for rebuilding a trustworthy team. And those were the exact words, too. Continuing on, page 163 asked what his biggest holdup was with the fictional movie. Crowley responded, quote, "I'm doing this myself. I say we and team a lot. But when it comes to nuts and bolts, working, writing, leveraging the project into securing Hollywood money, it's just me. I hope to change this by reinvigorating the process, rebuilding a trustworthy team." End quote. We still do not know who removed or hid this post from the Gray State Facebook page or why. Hopefully the post will reappear one day. And Greg, very good way to word that there. That was removed. It could have been deleted. It could have been hidden. All we know is that it was there after the death. Someone pointed it out. People did get screenshots of it. Right. And I think sent that to Apple Valley Police Department to say, look, there's things missing from the Facebook page. Why is someone deleting things? Can you please investigate it? Him's looking for a trustworthy team and rebuilding. Basically, I take that as I have discovered and found the snakes within my inner circle are all snakes. I'm starting from scratch. So the information comes out on the 26th about Danny's response. And I want 10%. Give me the company. I'm doing all this work. And here's David knowing, once again, Danny August is going to read it. Danny August Mason is going to read it, saying, I'm doing this all myself. I say we and team a lot, but I'm doing this all myself. That is just sticking the knife in the back of Danny August Mason, and more than that, twisting it. So this is done for two purposes. One, he's answering the questions for the first side to the fans. Number two is he knows Danny August Mason is going to read it, and so he's letting him have it. I'm doing all this myself. I'm rebuilding a trustworthy team. In other words, I don't trust my current team. Those are huge words.
Yeah. And the timing, right? There can't be, it could be a coincidence, but come on, it's not a coincidence.
This is 4 days later, so he's letting the gauntlet down. The gavel's coming down. The rubber's hitting the road here by saying, no, I need a new group. I need a new team. I'm doing all this myself. And 4 days after getting a contractual, offer, a counter offer from the very person that he's intending this message to be seen by.
Right. And this makes you think, okay, did you ever have a trustworthy team? To use that word, too, is a big, big deal. And so when these guys all come out and say that they were part of this team, they don't know why David would ever want to distance himself from them. They don't understand it. There must be something wrong with David. Instead of realizing maybe David thought there was something wrong with them. And that's why he had to rebuild a trustworthy team, because the team that he had, or the team that he was distancing himself from, could not be trusted and should not be trusted. And I think they've done everything after David's death to show why these guys should not be trusted and why they are shameful people who tried to take David Crowley's project and tried to run with it, change it, to make money off of it, to take credit for it. And they continue to do that after David dies, where they say, even though David said he was rebuilding this team, and they put this out there in a post, we were always there. They make it very clear David was not the only person working on this, et cetera, et cetera. But then at the same time, they go on and they say David was distancing himself. We don't know why. He must have been going crazy. That's what they're basically saying.
Hallucinogens, drugs, marijuana, into conspiracy theories, all these things is what they threw his direction. They were playing all these cards in a poker hand, for instance. They're playing all the cards so everyone to get distracted without saying the truth. Here's what's going on. Now, what we know that the evidence supports that David Crowley, the decisions he made were typically correct. And I didn't know the guy, once again, that the decisions he made was correct. He had a very good radar, for things when his antenna went up regarding the attorney deal and this. And he had to rebuild. He slowly got that. Now, we know this from the facts, and the evidence proves from the goon squad that none of them could be trusted. Now, once again, I didn't know any of them. I don't know any of them today. I don't personally know them. But the evidence, once again, the facts, laying it straight out. David was right. These people could not be trusted. He knew better to trust them. And when his radar went off, his antenna went off, and he started pulling away. Yes, they had to spin that as him being distant, him losing his mind, going crazy. He was losing weight. He looked gaunt. He became strange. Well, that's the response to someone trapped into a corner, an animal trapped. And so they had to come out and redirect and deflect all this stuff and say that he was the bad guy. And the police ate it up hook, line, and sinker. The police took it all in this guy's nuts. Hey, in fact, you guys are telling us so much good information here. Let's sit down with Fox 9 and let's do an investigative thing on the news, and let's do some interviews with the Star Tribune, the local media here, because you guys are telling us some really good information. That's the stuff that got aired.
Right. That's what
the
they
goon squad making David Crowley look bad, and that's what got aired. And the problem here, once again, is the Apple Valley Police Department not knowing how to separate the wheat from the chaff on all this information coming in, what's real, what's not. They never followed up. All this stuff was lies.
Yeah. Yep. Very interesting there.
Now, continuing on, it says, Sophia had to jump off here. We'll continue on. Responding to a question about the documentary Gray State, The Rise, was going to be released, David Crowley responded, "The Rise has suffered, quote, a catastrophic hard drive loss earlier this year. I'm working to get it back together." In parentheses, he says, hopefully for a free, all uppercase, free online release. You guys deserve a little something. And he closes the paragraphs there. I really have to be careful, though, because a mishandled doc release could absolutely sink, all capitals, production on the film or the series. I'm treading carefully, making sure that everything works out to the best, end quote. And this is, once again, the other response from David Crowley. He's trying to give it away for free. Now, this is a public post on September. Well, wait, when was this one?
Yeah, September 30th. Still part of that one.
Sean Wright, this was his baby and spent all the time doing this. And I think he called it 90% of the Rise was all his work. I did it all. And I'm going to sell it and we're going to make money. Here's David saying, I'm sure for the first time ever, we're going to give this away for free. Someone else's work that Sean's been doing.
We're going to give Sean's work away for free.
We're going to give this piece away and I'll take the rest, and Danny August Mason will have nothing. Can you see how the hatred for this David Crowley all came about? They really were upset when all this came about. So now, Greg, do you believe that there was even a catastrophic hard drive fail during this time, or was this a card he was playing in this chess match that was going on with the guys?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever really thought about that. He may have been using that. Yeah, I never really thought about that. I think that's possible. That would mean that
ultimately he's delaying it because he's blaming it on the hard drive loss. But was there really a hard drive loss? That'd be another thing that maybe someone could come out and talk about, or leave a comment in the bottom section here. Maybe even someone from the team. Did that exist, or is that just hearsay once again? Right.
Yeah, I never thought about. You got me thinking now here. This can be dangerous.
This September. So, Greg, and for the folks listening here on the show, this September, August, September, October, November, December is all chess. These are all chess moves that these guys are all making to cover their own butt. Danny, the dad, David Crowley, Comel. Everyone's doing these chess moves behind the scenes, jockeying for position here on the chessboard.
Right.
And this could be one of them from David Crowley saying, hey, I lost a bunch of stuff on the hard drive. Well, David, we know, had all his stuff backed up on multiple things. He was very meticulous in backing things up. I find it hard to believe that he had a hard drive that crashed and he lost everything.
You think maybe he was just kind of stalling again to get Danny to sign or to do something, because it was supposed to come out. I think the Rise was, and we'll find that later on in this.
The fans were pushing for this, either the movie or the documentary, whatever it was. They were just waiting, and they were losing. I don't want to say losing fans, but people were becoming upset. You were part of that group or not, or was it Ross for sure?
Yeah, Ross was, but yeah, there were many people that were like, dude, you've been saying this is going to come out since 2012. Where is it? There were people saying, this is never going to happen. This is a complete psyop and all that. We got all that stuff. It's crazy.
And so David's responding to people's questions, which are legitimate, with chess type of moves meant for the inner circle, but also not lying to potentially to the crowd. He was fighting a bunch of battles here. With all of this,
it's very smart for him to get all of that out there in the public record. The guy was very, very smart. That's a brilliant chess move, I think.
Now, continuing on the bottom of 163, it says September 30th, 2014 was a very important day as David Crowley had big plans for 2015. Now, this moves on. This next paragraph here moves on to the side of things where there was no suicide whatsoever. As far as David Crowley, people think that he wanted to commit suicide. All the plans were for huge 2015. Quote, today's posts represent the first visible beginnings of the Gray State resurrection. I can't get into too much too soon, but with the right amount of hard work, strategy, and miracle juice, the beginning of 2015 should see some amazing progress. End quote. Huge statement right there. And I don't think the police detectives saw that either, or maybe they did, because now, once again, there's no motive, because you can't say suicide. He just got done saying this is going to be tremendous. Crowley also wrote about a, quote, new revamped website coming soon, and many of his last known conversations involved plans for the future of his projects.
Yeah. Going back to the last thing that David Crowley said there about talking about the beginning of 2015. This is a huge statement, because we've been looking and trying to document all of the times David is planning for his future. This is another clear-cut case here where people are saying by August, by September, he was pretty much done. He had given up. He's not going to work on this case, blah, blah, blah. I forget what the exact date David's dad says that they had that call, and David said, no, I'm not going to go on with this project. But here you have more evidence, David Crowley planning for his future. And you will see that all the way up until December of 2014. He is planning for his future up until 6 days before Christmas, I believe, too. It's just crazy how much data that there is to show David Crowley was planning for his future. And then you have so many people saying, no, he wasn't. He was planning this murder suicide, and they couldn't do that because we kept pointing that stuff out. So then they said, okay, well, he just snapped. And then that was
they had to fall back on the snapped version, because the documentation, we had a bunch of people on the Justice page go back and, like you said, Greg, document all of the things that David said as actual quotes that came out of his mouth or from the keyboard of his machine that said that he was looking forward to 2015, looking forward to the future, being positive, being upbeat. Never once was he down in the dumps and saying, I'm going to give up this whole thing. Even the catastrophic hard drive fail, he puts a positive spin on it. So there's no evidence. A suicidal person will go through weeks, months, years of a decline and finally say, you know what? I just can't do it anymore. I can't do it. David, you never see this. So he then had the people pushing the official narrative had to say, you know what? Something must have made him snap. Then they said, oh, it's PTSD. Is something in the war, something in overseas. And he snapped because of all of his things he saw in the world that he never got therapy for, and he just snapped. So those are things that they will plant in, and you can see the responses from people. Once they know they're not right, then they switch gears and play a different card to respond to those types of things.
It's true. Snap, crackle, pop.
It is, and repeatedly on September 30th, 2014, David wrote about his vision for the Gray State franchise. Quote, a series which could be produced and released way faster than a film has been and has the potential to subvert the system. How can it not? Sorry, guys, but Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, while entertaining, lack a real world purpose. Gray State will not fail you. How could it? So he's saying here that yes, a film takes a lot of time. If they're going to turn this into a series, a franchise, things they could pump out episodes like a miniseries much quicker. It's going to be that. Game of Thrones, highly entertaining. Breaking Bad, highly entertaining. But David once again is correct. What's the real world purpose of either one of those shows? And they had huge followings. This would really be huge because it has a real life. I think in today's world here, 2023, where we're speaking, is this could have been a huge thing as people in the public, people are waking up to what's all going on. And David was doing this way back, trying to wake people up and have almost a mini series of real world things. I could imagine it now being a huge success if there was something you could turn on that was exposing real world kind of things. We're using YouTube and Rumble and BitChute now to get this information, but boy, a mini series or something. But we all know if this was too close to the truth, it would have been censored, blocked, and ex-nayed anyway. So
Very true.
Continuing on, it says, creating the Gray State franchise was David Crowley's full-time job, and he was doing everything he could to ensure the success of the franchise. Quote, it'll either be a great success story, a spectacular, highly visible failure, or either way, I guess we all put in our best shot, right? I guess that could be said about where the country is headed to, end quote.
That's pretty scary reading that and seeing where the country went after this and after David passed and everything. Pretty interesting stuff there of what he's talking about and of where the country was headed back then. Depending on a person's view, I guess, on how the country is today.
All right. We got time for a couple more paragraphs?
Sure. Yeah, we can go a few more.
And it's right. Many people did look at David Crowley as some sort of a prophet here of things that he's saying and things he's observing and things that he's predicting are all coming true. We're not going to go that far here in this book or on this podcast, but there were things like that he was just very awake. He knew what was going on and he saw what was coming. Continuing on, the questions kept coming and David Crowley answered as many questions as possible within those dedicated 20 minutes. Crowley was attempting to reach out directly to his supporters and doubters in order to address the criticism that the project received for its multiple delays in production. Starting a Kickstarter campaign for future production costs is more evidence that David Crowley was actively planning for the future in September 2014. We want to run a Kickstarter due to popular demand, but if we do, it'll be for a very specific person, like hiring a behind-the-scenes crew to document production, run live broadcasts, and give constant updates to fans. I never wanted the fans to fund this. That's like making your kids pay for their own Christmas presents. End quote. Once again, he's spot on the money. The final paragraph on page 164 says David Crowley was still trying to get, quote, big budget funding for Gray State in September 2014. Hopefully, wrote David, the strength of this project as a whole and what it represents with the people will help me get a big budget without sacrificing my intent. But hey, if I can't, then I'll take it back to low budget indie, like the 2012 trailer, end quote. Now, this too shows David had a plan B just in case his big budget dreams came crashing down. Very good point, Greg. He goes out of his way to say he's not going to lose the intent or give up the intent. He needs to keep the focus of the film to be there. If he sells out and they say, granted, we'll take it to a big screen theaters, but we're going to kind of rewrite and tone down some of your verbiage. He wasn't going to agree to that. We can't tone it down to make it friendly for all or politically correct. This had to be hard hitting. Next page.
This also shows it's just time after time where it's like even if this doesn't work out, even if nobody buys this thing, he's going to make it the same way that he made that $6,000 trailer, $6,600 trailer. Look at what he did for $6,600. Can you imagine what he could do for 60 grand, with 100 grand? He could probably do something very, very powerful. But once again, it goes against what they're saying. Even if the project was dead, we know 100% the project was not dead. But even if it was, he had a plan B to make sure that the project would never die. That there would be some type of a follow up, of a follow through to that 2012 trailer. And all these people know it. All of his friends and all of them probably know. They probably read the same stuff that we've all read. Why don't they see that? Or do they see it and they don't want to see it? Are they blind to
Well, they
it?
can't allow it to
They
come
can't allow
forth, I think, because
Yeah.
the evidence all points only one direction. So the point here of his statement, it shows David as a talented leader. A leader, in my book, is someone that does things without fear of failing.
Yep.
David clearly says this thing could fall on its face, or it could become wildly popular. He says, whatever the answer, we're doing it either way. He was not afraid of losing. He was not afraid of failing. That's a rare thing to find in a talented leader, whether it's in the business world, wherever, on the sports field. A leader like that, to say, we want to take the chance. We want to do it. We got to get it out there. It may fail. It may be successful, but we're doing it either way. So
right.
very, very good. And once again, it shows David had it together, thinking very clearly, high IQ. He knew what was going on. A brilliant man. New developments have enhanced the project's honesty and dedication to its origins, wrote Crowley. This is going to be brutal, end quote. Crowley also reminded people to, quote, stay tuned for updates. We will keep the entire production process as wide open as possible. He wanted to be transparent.
What do you think these new developments are that he's talking about? Do you think that has to do with, once again, Danny August Mason kind of getting the shaft?
Boy, good question. I don't know.
What are these new? I mean, what
It could
new
be very well
developments?
with the deal with the mics that
Okay.
are saying we're not going to let this get diluted or washed out by big players in Hollywood. We're going to go to the mics who are, and I don't know this, maybe average to high average guys that are still Hollywood producers, and there is money for big budget, but new enhancements. So he's going to keep it dedicated to its origins and keep the project's honesty. Maybe that's just saying, look, I've got people in place. We know, and maybe that I'm starting to lean there with you on that one, Greg, that this is another chess move. Knowing who's going to be reading this.
This is another area right around this time when he's told the mics. I think they meet. I forget what day they meet. Sometime in September, right?
We could look back on the timeline because he goes out there first in May or June.
Yeah,
and then wheels and deals, and then goes back there a second time. I think it was around this time, and things all are basically confirmed. Everything's good.
Yeah, I think it was 2 weeks prior to David posting this Facebook.
Oh, really?
Facebook thing, and so that's when they're going to turn
he
it
might
into
be
it.
fishing here to see what kind of response he'll get from his inner circle, because now he's already knowing he's moving ahead without them. Interesting.
Yeah, and when you look at the comments, as far as what I saw, or people asking questions, I didn't see a lot of the Gray State Goons in there asking questions or commenting or anything.
Correct.
In there either.
Yeah, he did this all himself, and the people commenting were the actual true fans. They weren't anyone in the leadership, any part of the management group.
I found that very, very interesting.
Because once again, I don't think that they knew about it. I also don't think they cared. They were riding on David's coattails. They had their own lives to live. Mm-hmm. David, this was his life. This was his full-time job. And so he did this, and maybe that's why he just did a spur of the moment, 20 minutes answering questions, knowing no one else would be in there to impede him or dilute or water down his answers. Interesting.
Yeah, and 20 minutes is not a very long time, especially if he just say, hey, for the next 20 minutes and boom, and people start flooding in. It's almost like he wants to make sure that none of those Gray State goons have a chance to
I
even
agree.
jump in, maybe.
I think that he didn't want them there, so he could drop some of these little breadcrumbs here and then also answer questions in between. In response to the comment that it's been 3 years since Gray State was first developed, Crowley responded, quote, "No, it's been a lot longer, and there are years to go," end quote.
More evidence of the future.
Thinking highly of the future. Yep,
Yeah.
very positive. In a separate comment, Crowley confirmed his long-term plans. Quote, "The film is ready to go, but at night it might take forever and then still fail at any point in production. A series might be immediately tangible, and instead of interfering with the film, set it up for success a year or two down the road. Big picture stuff," end quote. Once again, referencing to not being afraid to failing. He's got big plans, and there's options A and B. There's things that if it doesn't work, there are other options. That means that he's thinking big time. David Crowley's most challenging thing about the project was, quote, "trailblazing the timeline. It's been either a very small team or just me alone working on this thing for years, trying to make it work. I do not just want this movie done so the fans can see it online. I want millions to get blindsided by it in theaters," end quote. Once again, referencing myself, the term alone is mentioned, the quote small team. And he's also not doing it just to make the fans happy. He's trying to get this topic exposed big time. So David's future plans for the movie were clear. Quote, "We're talking to producers about it. If we can't tease a producer into splitting 15 to 30 million, which is still our goal, then we will take it back and do it independently. The point is, we want Hollywood money, but not Hollywood politics," end quote. Very important topic here. And he also drops the 30 million.
Yeah, which they said, oh no, that was never part of it. That was all just made up. And here he is saying it here. And this could be where Jordan Page got that. And then when you talk to Michael Bozio, that's what he said. He said, "Hey, yeah, we figured it would cost about 25 to 30 million to make this project."
And anything less, meaning they would then, hey, if that doesn't work, we'll go back and do it and release it an indie film. We'll do something like that because we're not going to be removing the point, the thrust of the topics.
Right. Well, he wants to make sure that this happens.
And he also admits here, he's basically saying that he knows how Hollywood works. Hollywood is politics. You're going to get in for big bucks. There are going to be certain things you're not allowed to touch, topics you can't touch, things you can't say, and whatnot. And so we want the Hollywood money, but not the Hollywood politics. And so these guys were a perfect fit, I think.
Yeah, that's hard to get the Hollywood money without the Hollywood politics, though. That's pretty wishful thinking, but definitely, I'm sure in a perfect world, every person would want that, and I don't blame them at all. But that may be a good place to wrap this one up here, Dan. What do you think?
Yes, the next topic it gets into more with Kamel and some of her friends and things like that. But this is a good episode, Greg, because it touches on so many things, so many positive things, messages that David is talking about, being positive, looking forward to the future. In other words, anti-suicidal. We could throw those things away. He never was suicidal. He was talking about the plans and him dropping all these breadcrumbs to the guys.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, and all within that one day really September 30th, and hopefully it's still out there. But if people want to go back and read that, you can read all of the different comments, everything that David Crowley
it was a giant,
said on that day.
Just a giant thread on Facebook, was it not? That comments were just threading it in there with all these various comments, and he was jumping around answering things.
Yep, and we also have that on. I'm sure you have it too, Dan, on your website, on Ugly Truth.
I don't think it's there as far as the September 30th stuff. That was
okay.
I think you have that covered as far as the evidence, and that's very impactful stuff. And that is where that one of those quotes was removed completely, deleted, removed, hidden, whatever it was there, screenshotted, and then it was no longer there.
And then it just happened to deal with a trustworthy team. Happened to
Yeah.
deal with the team. The second one that we'll talk about later is the one on December 9th that somehow the police do find. They do find that one, and I'm still not sure how they found it, who screenshotted it, but somebody wanted to make sure that information about December 9th, and we'll get back to that later on, did not die, which also deals with more of David's quote unquote friends, or this team, which we call the Gray State Goons.
Awesome. All right, thanks for your time, Greg. I got to jump, but thanks again for the this is a very good episode. I think it'll get a lot of plays, it'll get a views, and hopefully there'll be a lot of comments beneath it, talking about it. So please share this.
Thank you, brother. Always nice to have you here, and everybody stay tuned until next month. We will be back for another episode of the Gray Stage Podcast. God bless you all.